is Block 7, the British Generation, Section 6, the War in Europe, with the War in Europe in 1944. Let's start in the East. The War in the East in 1944 is going to see the largest the largest single attack of the entire war. Across this entire massive Soviet front, the Soviets counterattack and continue to counterattack. And in 1944, they clear the Germans out of the Soviet Union itself. By 1944, political considerations began to play a role in the course of the war on top of military considerations. And one of them took place around the Russian capital city of Poland. As the Russians were approaching, the Poles rose up against their German occupiers and started battling the Germans for control of Warsaw and the surrounding area. And of course they expected the Red Army, the Soviet Army, to continue along the way and help them liberate their own city. Stalin ordered the Red Army to stop 20 miles outside of Warsaw. Without Soviet help, the Polish resistance, the Polish National Army, stood no chance against the Germans, and Stalin stood by and let the Germans destroy what was left of Polish leadership. The reason for this is Stalin had every plan of turning Poland into a client state of the Soviet Union after the war, and he had every reason to let the best and brightest Poles, especially the best and brightest Poles who were not communists, get killed off by the Germans. Stalin realized that, if these brave, organized resistance fighters were killed by the Germans, they could not be brave and organized resistance fighters to Soviet domination of Poland. So over the protests of Churchill and Roosevelt both, the Soviet army stopped outside of Warsaw, let the Germans destroy the Polish resistance movement, and then continued on their merry way across Eastern Europe. By the end of 1944, the Soviets had reached the eastern border of Germany, and the German capital city of Berlin was only about 30 or 40 miles away, as the Russians were stopped on the river Oder. In the West in 1944, starting down here in Italy, the city of Rome was finally taken on the 4th of June 1944, and then 2 days later, the long-awaited Second Front, the long-awaited Allied invasion of Europe, took place. It's under the overall command of Eisenhower. For the last 3 years, England has become this enormous military depot as millions of men, supplies, food, ammunition gathered around England. There was a massive campaign of disinformation that made the Germans think that the blow was going to fall in the area of Calais, but in reality, on the evening, we have some pictures over here. I'm sorry, I forgot about the pictures. Here's the city of Warsaw after the uprising. It is, if you have a look, I mean, there's not a single undamaged building in the entire city of Warsaw. And then skipping across now back to D-Day. Here's General Eisenhower prepping his paratroopers before the invasion itself goes off. The paratroopers landed behind enemy lines early in the morning on the 6th of June 1944 and worked to cut communications to disrupt resupply of the German army in Normandy. The blow falls here. On the morning of the 6th of June 1944, the largest invasion fleet in the history of the world launches itself from ports all over southern England, and British, American, and Canadian troops storm the beaches. It's worth having a look at some of the pictures. I don't know why it keeps linking to that picture. Stop linking to that picture, so to speak. Always something. Here's a picture from one of the invasion barges. Those hills along the beaches were defended by German soldiers. These troops are about to hit the beach. Here are American troops on Omaha Beach evacuating the wounded. For all of the fears that the invasion would be a bloodbath, it actually went off pretty bloodlessly in most of the areas. The Allies had total air supremacy. On the day of the invasion, the British, Canadian, and American air forces flew over 10,000 sorties compared to about 4 by the Germans. There was, if the troops saw an airplane in the sky, it was a friendly airplane, first of all. Second of all, the campaign of disinformation worked beautifully. The Germans did not expect the blow to fall at Normandy, and when it did, the Allies attacked on 5 beaches. 4 of the beaches, when the fighting was stiff, but on 4 of the beaches, the Allies were ashore pretty easily. The exception was on Omaha Beach, where the Americans had a difficult time. For several hours, the outcome was in doubt. There was tanks that were supposed to float onto the beaches. They all sank. There were more Germans than expected. The landing craft got confused. There was cross currents, troops didn't land where they were supposed to land, and it was a little bit of a mess on Omaha Beach. But by the afternoon, the Allies had a toehold in Europe. After D-Day itself, back to our map. After D-Day itself, the Allies took a little bit of time to break out from the Normandy beachheads, but by the summer, led again under Eisenhower's overall command, led by General Patton, the greatest tank commander the Americans ever had, and Montgomery, his a little more cautious British counterpart, the Allies had driven into Western Europe. And you can start to tell at this point that Germany is going to be squished in this vice. Also aiding in this effort was a second invasion of France from Italy. The south of France was invaded, and the smushing together of Germany was ongoing. Pictures. Here's just some more pictures of D-Day. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Let's start here. Start here. From there. No, not from there. Oh my God. Here's the beaches of Normandy on the day after the successful invasion. You can see all the ships kind of right up to the beach. Thousands upon thousands of men, the barrage balloons in the sky preventing air attack. You see all the trucks, things getting organized here on the beaches. In the summer of 1944, in August, Paris was finally liberated. Paris had been under German control for 5 years. And this guy over here, he's going to play a role in the rest of for the next 20 years after World War II. That's Charles de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle was a French general at the beginning of the war. He was really the only French general to serve with any distinction in the German conquest of France in 1940. He escaped and led the French resistance movement from Great Britain and from the French colonies. He was allowed to march into Paris at the head of the French army that had kind of been reconstituted to a degree. And of course, the cheering and the celebration in Paris was incredible. Hitler ordered Paris to be destroyed. But his own, I guess the equivalent would be the Secretary of the Interior, a guy by the name of Albert Speer. And Speer countermanded Hitler's order and said, do not destroy Paris. The city is too beautiful. The city is, that Paris will exist long after the conflicts of the Second World War were long gone. So Paris was spared destruction. It was one of the few large cities in Europe that were spared bombardment or serious bombardment from the air. What happened happened next was known as the Battle of the Bulge. In mid-December of 1944, the Germans have one last try, if you will. By December of 1944, the Allies have reached the western part of Germany. What the Germans are going to try to do one more time, they have one more attack in the west. Their strategic goal, the German strategic goal, is to split. That was awfully drawn, but that's the start word for you. Their goal was to split the American and the British Army in half. And if the Germans hoped that if the Allied armies were split in half, they would argue with each other and sue for a peace, leaving the Germans to focus all of their energy on this massive Soviet threat to their east. Their goal was the port city of Antwerp, where they would hold on to that city and cut the Americans and the British off from their supplies. The German attack came and created a bulge in the line. This blue line here, what the blue line is the American and British lines. This orange is where the Germans attacked. And you can see that their attack created a bulge in the line, and that's where the name, the Battle of the Bulge, came from. However, it was slowed up by a couple things. First of all, it was all snowy out. Second of all, the Germans were so short of fuel by this time that their tanks, you know, they did not have any fuel to fight and travel. They could travel or they could fight, but they almost didn't have enough gas to do both. And third, a group of American paratroopers, the 101st Airborne, was here in the city of Bastogne. And in the city of Bastogne, they refused to retreat, they refused to surrender, and they interfered with the Germans' ability to move men, move supplies, and continue their advance. And for their heroism, they earned the moniker, the Battling Bastards of Bastogne. After a few days, yes, they had this enormous bulge in the lines, but after a few days, they wanted to get this far. Okay, they wanted to go from here all the way to here, but they only got to here. After a few days, their fuel shortages began to show. The weather cleared up, so the Allied air supremacy reasserted itself. And General Patton, down here to the south, turned his entire Third Army and raced northward, aiming to crash into the German flank. The Germans realized that their gambit had failed. They retreated, and that would be the last German attack in the West. And here are American troops in the city of Bastogne. Back to our map. On Christmas of 1944, this is going to play a role in post-war. Again, this is politics kind of asserting itself towards the latter stages of the war. Christmas of 1944, Winston Churchill travels to Greece. His wife didn't want him to go. His wife said you have to celebrate Christmas with the family. But Churchill traveled to Greece to broker a truce between communist Greeks and non-communist Greeks. His truce prevents the communists from coming to power in Greece, which is going to play a large role in the post-war world. Because as you can see, there's a lot of communist forces heading westward into Germany. So by Christmas of 1944, what you have is a Soviet massive army on Germany's eastern flank, a combined British-American-Canadian army on Germany's western flank, and now when the weather cleared, it would be time for both of them to come together and crush Germany in a vice. Ow, foot.